Daniel Carter had worked at Ashwood Station for nearly 12 years. It wasn't a large station. Only a few trains stopped there each day, and after sunset the platforms usually became quiet. Most evenings followed the same routine. Daniel checked the waiting rooms, locked and used entrances, collected lost property, and made one final walk along the platforms before heading home. Nothing ever changed. That was why he noticed the man immediately. It was a cold evening in late October. A light fog drifted across the tracks as Daniel made his final inspection. Platform 1 was empty. Platform 2 was empty. Platform 3 was closed for maintenance. Then he looked toward Platform 4. Someone was sitting on the old wooden bench near the far end of the platform. Daniel frowned. The last passenger train had left nearly an hour earlier. No trains were scheduled until morning. The station should have been empty. The man sat perfectly still beneath one of the yellow lamps. He appeared to be in his 50s. Dark coat, dark hat, hands folded calmly in his lap. Daniel began walking toward him. His footsteps echoed across the platform. The stranger didn't react, didn't turn his head, didn't move. As Daniel got closer, a strange feeling settled over him. The station seemed unusually quiet. Even the distant sounds of traffic had faded away. "Excuse me," Daniel called. No response. The man remained motionless. Daniel continued forward. The fog thickened around the lamps. For a moment, he lost sight of the bench. Then he reached it and stopped. The bench was empty. The man had vanished. Daniel looked up and down the platform. There was nowhere to go. No exits. No stairways nearby. No place to hide. Yet the stranger was gone. Only a folded newspaper remained on the bench. Daniel picked it up. The paper felt old. The edges were yellowed and brittle, as if it had been sitting untouched for years. He looked around one final time. Nothing. The platform was empty again. A cold wind swept through the station. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn echoed through the night. But according to the schedule, no train should have been anywhere near Ashwood Station. Daniel looked down at the newspaper in his hands. Then he noticed the date printed across the front page. His heart skipped a beat. The newspaper wasn't from this year. It wasn't even from this decade. The date read, October 14th, 1983. Daniel stared at the date on the newspaper. October 14th, 1983. More than 40 years old. At first, he assumed it had to be a joke. Someone had probably left a vintage newspaper on the bench. That was the only logical explanation. Yet something about it felt wrong. The paper wasn't a reproduction. It looked genuine. The pages were worn with age, and the ink had slightly faded. Daniel folded it carefully and took it home. That night, he couldn't stop thinking about the man on Platform 4. The stranger hadn't spoken, hadn't moved, and somehow had disappeared in a matter of seconds. The next morning, Daniel brought the newspaper to work. During his lunch break, he visited the small local library across the street from the station. The building contained decades of archived newspapers and town records. He approached the librarian and showed her the paper. Her eyes widened. "This is real," she said. "Where did you get it?" Daniel hesitated. "At the station." The woman looked confused but said nothing. Together they searched through old records. The front page matched perfectly. Every headline, every advertisement, every photograph. The newspaper was authentic. As Daniel turned the pages, one article caught his attention. The headline read, "Final steam service arrives at Ashwood Station." The article described a historic train journey that had taken place on October 14th, 1983. The same date printed on the newspaper. Several photographs accompanied the story. One image showed a crowd gathered on Platform 4. Families waved as the train arrived. Railway workers stood proudly beside the tracks. Daniel studied the picture carefully. Then his stomach tightened. Sitting alone on a bench near the edge of the platform was a familiar figure. Dark coat, dark hat, hands folded calmly in his lap. The same man. Daniel felt a chill run through him. The photograph had been taken more than 40 years ago. Yet the stranger looked exactly the same. Not older, not younger. Exactly the same. That evening, Daniel returned to Platform 4 before closing time. The fog had returned. A cold mist drifted between the lamps. For nearly an hour, nothing happened. Then, at precisely 10:47 p.m., he saw him again. The man sat quietly on the same bench, waiting. Daniel remained where he was. This time, he wasn't going to approach too quickly. He watched from a distance. The stranger slowly turned his head. For the first time, their eyes met. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. The man raised one hand and pointed toward the tracks. Then, somewhere beyond the fog, a train whistle echoed through the darkness. A train that wasn't on any schedule. A train that shouldn't have existed. The sound grew louder, closer, and Daniel realized something was emerging from the mist. The whistle echoed through the station. Daniel stood frozen on platform 4. According to the schedule, no trains were due until morning. Yet the sound continued to grow louder. Closer. The fog drifted across the tracks, hiding everything beyond a few yards. Then he saw it. A bright light appeared in the distance. Slowly, the outline of a train emerged from the mist. It wasn't a modern train. The locomotive was black and covered in steam. Its carriages looked decades old, exactly like the trains shown in the photographs from 1983. The train rolled silently into the station. No passengers waited on the platform. No announcements played over the speakers. The entire station seemed frozen in time. Daniel looked toward the bench. The mysterious man was standing now. For the first time, Daniel could see his face clearly. He looked ordinary. Not frightening. Not threatening. Just calm. Almost as if he had been waiting for something for a very long time. The train came to a stop. Its doors opened. No one stepped out. No one stepped in. The man slowly walked toward the nearest carriage. Daniel wanted to call out to him. To ask who he was. To ask how he appeared in a photograph taken more than 40 years ago. But no words came. The stranger paused at the door and looked back one final time. Then he smiled. A small, quiet smile. And boarded the train. Seconds later, the whistle sounded again. The doors closed. The train began moving. Slowly at first. Then faster. Steam drifted across the platform. The fog swallowed the final carriage. And just like that, the train was gone. The station became silent once more. Daniel stood alone beneath the lamps. The bench was empty. The tracks stretched into the darkness. Everything looked normal again. The next morning, he searched the station archives one last time. This time he found a report attached to the 1983 article. It described a railway worker named Thomas Hale. According to the report, Thomas had spent years working at Ashwood Station. On the night of the final steam service, he was supposed to travel home on the last train. But he never boarded. Witnesses said he had been seen waiting alone on platform 4. After that night, no one ever saw him again. At the bottom of the report was a photograph. Daniel recognized the face immediately. It was the same man from the bench. The same man from the newspaper. The same man who had boarded the train the night before. Daniel never saw him again. But some evenings, when fog drifts across the tracks, station workers still report hearing a distant whistle. And they always check platform 4, just in case someone is still waiting.